Yeah, baby.
Yes, American Waller. Yes, good. Our conversion therapy is working.
Jesus.
Oh, give one more. You're never going back across the pond. All right, Nick. 2 Mustang guys and a Mustang.
I couldn't be further from your average Mustang guy, maybe. But, Ben, this is a treat for me. I've loved these cars ever since I first saw it. I think I saw it racing at Goodwood way back in the revival. And they just caught my attention. I just think it's so... It sums up what American racing is all about.
It is. It is.
Really is.
And it's on the same scale. It's such a pure car, but it's such a muscular and visceral car at the same time. And, you know, we've done a mile so far, and it's incredibly comfortable. You've got a radio if you want it. And I'm just...
We'll turn the radio on.
We're getting that stuff over with early. We're getting that stuff over with early.
Well, you've got the sound, and we've got the side pipes rather than the mufflers. And that, to me, I mean, this was a 1965. It's an early edition.
Yep.
And I think it's just perfect. It is, I think, probably the nicest GT350 on the road today.
It just might be. It's very well sorted thanks to Brian Oliver and his team at Automotive Restorations. They just refreshed this, you know, over the last season, and it's driving very well. But this is really the car that took the Mustang from another sports car to the American sports car. Do you disagree?
No, it is exactly that. And that's what Ford did. They had just finished with the Cobra, so that was kind of coming to the end. And Shelby worked with Ford on this model, on this car, really to get it ready for the track and for high performance motoring.
Yeah, and considering how big and how global the Mustang brand, it really is its own brand and its own culture today.
Huge.
Considering how big that is, this car comes from very humble beginnings in a small garage in California. And, you know, everyone's watched the movie Ford vs. Ferrari at this point, you know, where they talk about Ford going to Le Mans, beating Ferrari. Yeah. But these cars were built basically in a hangar warehouse in California, and we've seen some great pictures that I'm sure we can flush up here of just, you know, probably dozens of cars in that warehouse getting ready for that Shelby treatment, which, you know, in terms of building the car, was a lot of taking things out of the car, not exactly adding things in.
Absolutely. But you've got to remember that Ford in 1965, they were at their peak of getting into racing.
Right. They
were doing the GT40 program aimed at Le Mans, to win Le Mans, and they did. First 3 cars. And this really was sold to support the racing, perhaps, as often things are. But it was a huge success, but in so many different areas. You know, you could rent a car from Hertz, a Mustang, and they are now hugely collectible.
Right.
So it covered all the bases, but for a race car like this, it's comfortable, as you say.
It really is. It really is comfortable. And, you know, we were discussing before the cameras were rolling that, you know, all these companies today, you know, you want a GT3. Okay, coilovers, take out the rear seats, better tires, less weight.
And it was all done back then.
Right.
I can't do the math, but 60 years ago.
60 years ago.
Yeah.
And if you're doing the math, that's 30 years before I was born. But this is still, this might be the car, out of anything in the Audrain collections, this might be the single car I would take home for a week.
I would agree with you. I'd have to fight you over the keys. And it was a very early car in the collection.
Yeah.
It's one of the cars that really was the root the ground floor of the Audrain collection now.
Yes. This really stands for everything that, you know, we're into in terms of collecting. A car that you could use in so many different aspects of your life.
Yeah.
It does well on the track. You know, we're doing this right now at 40 miles an hour. I could sit here all day
fun.
just because of the vibrating and how
It's fun.
alive the car is, but at the same time, it's not tiring us out. And the ride quality is very good so far. I mean, we're about to start getting into the turns, but...
We're very lucky to have these great roads in Newport.
Oh, yeah.
Talking about the racing, and this car is finished in the Wimbledon white with the, or Wimbledon cream white with the blue stripes, which is now accepted as the American racing colors, if you like. And I've got a very interesting story, and it's a story that I have been brought up on.
Really?
The history of how they came to have this livery. And back in back before the war, in pre-war racing, when the equivalent of the FIA were assigning color schemes to international teams, because racing back then in the early 20s was all about international, and you were a British car, you were an Italian team, you were a German team, an American team.
Yep.
Everybody followed the nation rather than the actual team.
Sure.
As it is today. So America was given the color scheme of a white bodywork with a dark blue painted chassis, because back then the chassis, you could see the chassis rails underneath the coachwork, underneath the body. Well, that didn't really work. When racing returned and Briggs Cunningham brought racing back to Europe with his first cars in 1950 and 1951, they needed to adapt the color scheme. Now, no chassis to be seen, no chassis visible, so you couldn't paint the blue down there. Now, I've been told that it was my godfather, whose name was Stanley Sedgwick, who was a great friend of Briggs Cunningham, and in fact he managed the team for Briggs throughout his Le Mans
Really?
years. And I have it on good authority that he and Briggs were discussing how to finish the cars, and it was Stan's suggestion that he paints the blue down the middle of the body, along the hood, over the roof, over the tail, in sort of deference to the chassis rails. Now, I could be wrong.
Wow.
It's a great story, and I love stories in history, and you should never let a good story get in the way of the truth. That's what I spent my school days learning. But I think it's a great story, and of course nowadays it's like the trademark.
Right.
It's the logo. So it'd be very interesting.
That is an interesting
I would
story.
love to hear the comments. If anybody else has heard that story. I know the Cunningham team were certainly the first in the post-war era to paint the cars like this, and everybody followed. And then some would then change it to the other way around, and you have a blue body with white stripes.
Well, I'm going to choose to believe that story.
I would,
for the sake of a good time.
You heard it here first.
Yes. And while you were telling that story and raising your voice, as we continued to accelerate, we took our first set of turns, and this car feels heavy. The steering is very heavy.
Okay.
You got to muscle this car around.
It's a muscle car, Ben. But listen to that noise. I don't believe you could ever tire of that.
No.
And you certainly wouldn't want the radio on.
I don't need the radio. But I guess it wouldn't save much weight
It's
taking
kind of
it
funny
out.
to see it. I mean, it's a very small little dial or dash. But I would delete that if I was ordering one.
Oh, absolutely. So, Nick, can you believe that there are so many people who go on YouTube and love our stuff, but they don't see all our stuff?
I can't believe that, Ben.
It's actually...
Why is that?
I don't know. Well, part of the reason is they're not subscribed to the YouTube channel. So what do we tell those people?
Subscribe!
It's not hard. You just have to hit the subscribe button.
Press the button.
We're not asking you to do an engine swap.
Even I can press the button to subscribe.
You heard it here first.
Oh.
So easy, a Nick Waller could do it.
So do it.
Do it, please.
But no, I love the period details on this car.
This is an addicting car to drive. There are so many senses. The steering wheel's vibrating.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sound.
Yeah.
You know, you got to work just to have a conversation. We're going to be out of breath by the time this video finishes.
But I always think you should have to work to drive a great car.
Yes.
You've got to put some effort into it.
Yes.
And then you get that sensation back and you feel rewarded at the end of the day.
Yes.
Just before you fall asleep.
Yep.
And I think this is a car that puts a smile on your face.
Yes. And it's set up very well. It's very firm, but you're not bouncing around at the same time.
Not at all. And yet it's not harsh.
No, it's definitely not harsh. The seats basically eat up any of the bumps. The seats are extremely comfortable. The driving position's good. You know, you think of Mustangs today, and, you know, there's a lot of jokes going around about Mustangs crashing and, you know, not being able to handle well. And like all cars, Mustangs have gotten bigger.
Yeah.
But just the general size of this car, it's got a V8, but it's not too big. You don't feel like there's too much weight in the front.
Yeah.
There's very little weight behind us. I think they stuck the rear tire back there essentially to plant the rear end.
Right.
Because there's nothing back there. This is an early car, so the battery is also in the trunk, which gives you some weight back there.
Interesting.
But besides that, it's, you know, it's
balanced.
a very tossable car, but the steering is where all the weight comes through. I mean, mid-turn, you're feeling it right in your forearms as opposed to in your wrists.
Well, I look forward to that. And this is the 289. It's 350 horsepower, 4.7 litres, I think.
Right.
4.7 litre V8. Now, some of these cars were supercharged. I'm not sure what that would give. I mean, not having driven one. But that little bit of extra fizz.
I think there are plenty of people out there who might say, well, 350 horsepower, you know,
plenty.
My Civic has 350 horsepower now, but when you have an experience as active as this,
absolutely,
you don't need any more power.
Yeah.
You know, this is a two-hand on the wheel. I'm focused driving this vehicle.
Yeah.
But there's nothing out of place. Everything is right where you expect it to be for a modern car. You're not reaching for the gear shift too far. You're not reaching for the pedals. Everything's right in your wheelhouse.
Exactly what you want.
And every time I accelerate, I think I'm at red line because the car's so loud. And I look at the tach, which is right in the center of the dashboard.
Yeah.
And you're barely crossing $3,000.
But it's very torquey.
Very torquey. It claims that the red line is at 6,500. That feels like weeks away when you're accelerating from the low end. This has plenty of power to get you anywhere you want to go. You know, on a normal road.
It's not a thrashy car. You would never thrash this. You'd probably very, very rarely get it up to peak rev.
Right.
And very tractable.
Yeah. Yeah, everything about it is just easy, considering, you know, it's such a brutal, you know, type of track car, really.
I remember many years ago when my sons were growing up, we had a PlayStation, and on that PlayStation you could drive the 350, you could race the GT350, and I used to sneak away and play on the PlayStation. And I seem to remember, I could be making this up again, but I think I held the fastest lap around Silverstone, which was my favorite circuit to drive on. I held that for a good 2 or 3 months.
Really?
In PlayStation land. But it never felt as good as this.
Wow. Yeah, you don't exactly get the same feelings on a PlayStation as you do sitting in an original Shelby GT350.
Not quite.
There really aren't many American cars that are as iconic as this, and that's why it's so special driving it. And that's why I would take it, I think, if someone said, pick a car from the collection to drive for a week. Everyone knows exactly what it is, but at the same time, it really is an if you know, you know car.
Yeah.
It's very special, but it's so iconic that anyone, whether they know about cars, whether they know nothing about cars, they will know that this is a special Mustang.
Absolutely.
And then you turn it on, and it's absolutely confirmed.
It completely confirms all your hopes.
Right.
Hopes and dreams.
Right. Wow.
Just getting used to it.
Yeah,
getting
of
comfy.
course. Oh, of
Get
course.
a bit of wheel. Well, it's confirmed exactly what I thought it would be like.
Yes. Well, that was fourth. There you go.
It's very close.
It's a bit more frightening in the passenger seat, I will say.
No, don't be scared.
And there's no wussy handle.
You don't want a wussy handle.
I'll hold the door handle just in case I have to roll out. There's nothing here you don't need. Literally nothing. It's
exactly right.
Pure American motoring.
Steering is fabulous.
It really is.
A lot of feel. But you just want to keep doing that. You
all
just
day.
want to keep changing down.
We could go through a tank of gas in about an hour.
We will be.
Without even trying. This is border.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
There's a slight wallow to it.
Yep.
But not too bad.
Yep.
But it's turning circle's good.
Everything about it really works. There's nothing that. It's loud.
It's loud.
In case you didn't know.
It's in your face. It's I'm here. I'm fast. I'm American.
Yep.
And it just. It feels so good.
You know, I'm all about enthusiasm when driving. I love the noise. I love the feel. After about an hour, this turns into an earplug car. Very quickly, you could lose your hearing. If all Mustangs were this good, they would all be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah. It's fabulous that I think Ford is continuing with the Mustang tradition.
They really are. And the new GTD is set to come out within a couple years.
The GTD
Yes.
we had on show at the Audrain Concours this
Yes.
year. Very, very nice.
Really impressive in person. A lot of special details about that car. That car is going to be a world beater.
But it's that heritage that I'm so happy that Ford is continuing, because they've got a lot of. They have to do it. You know, once you establish a brand like this, you have to continue.
Yeah. Mustangs and Corvettes have such a demand.
Exactly right. But I think the Mustang, well, it falls between the two camps of being a sports car and more of a touring car.
Yep. And there's a bunch of different iterations of the Mustang now, but you know, back then with a 6-cylinder Mustang, an 8-cylinder, and then this, it was really an incredible thing. What would you change about this car if you were Carroll Shelby and you were signing the dashboard?
Do you know, it's so funny to see the Shelby signature.
If I was there in the period, I think he would have signed my forehead. Wow.
That is...
You can't mimic that.
And that sound is a joy. The fact that you're producing that sound with your right foot.
Oh,
It's like dancing.
it's not a car you sneak out with.
Not at all.
Right
Well,
here.
That could be a problem.
Isn't that heavy right there?
It is quite.
Is that abnormally heavy, or am I not used to
I
cars
think
like
it's
this?
a big. I think it's a big. To be honest, for a car with this amount of grunt,
Yeah.
it's quite a big car.
Yeah.
But once you reach, what was that, 4,000?
Yeah.
It sticks to the road very nicely.
Yeah. Yeah, Shelby did a lot of work with the suspension, with adjustable front coilovers, Coney shocks in the rear. There's a very stiff roll bar that runs across the front.
You can feel that stiffness, actually.
Yeah, everything about it is stiff, but the suspension does allow it to really eat up the bumps. And we keep going back to the seats. If you sat in these seats, you would never want to get up. And that's part of this experience.
Yeah.
It just invites you to keep pushing through the throttle.
There's that blend of comfort, and also with the fact that actually I'm doing a real job.
Right.
And you need to have that balance.
Yeah.
And this does work.
And you have to be focused, but not to a point where you're nervous about the experience. You know, you're using a bit more muscle all around, but, you know, ergonomically it's perfect.
To be honest, the steering doesn't feel that heavy to me.
Even in that turn, that off-camber,
It's fine.
it caught me off guard for
There
one,
have been
but
period cars from the 60s.
no
I've
power
driven-
steering.
Well, that's it, with no power steering.
Right.
And, you know, some people find that tiring. We're all too spoiled with modern steering aids and power steering and power this and power that. Get rid of all of it, because you lose the touch, you lose the sensation, you lose that driving experience.
Right. Is this the perfect sports car?
Oh, that's a big statement. That's a big.
It's a big car.
It's
It's a very important car.
You know, for its class, it's right up there.
Yep.
Now, what is the 1965 GT350 competing with? What was it competing back in the day?
Well, something like a, you know, Zagato Aston Martin comes to mind.
Yeah.
That is another level of spending and another level of performance. However, I'm just talking in terms of your experience behind the wheel and the performance this car offers.
Yeah.
I don't know what's up there from the mid-60s with this kind of handling and 350 horsepower.
I doubt whether there was much around that could beat it.
Right.
Which made it such a success. And I remember the advertising at the day was always very iconic. And it was selling a lifestyle.
Right.
It was selling that dream. Because in 1965, you know, we'd been 20 years after the war.
Yep.
It was boom time for the United States.
Yep.
Money around, people were purchasing everything that could be purchased. But this was this was aimed at fun. It wasn't, you're not going to go down to the shops in this.
Sure. Well, I might.
I might too. And there's plenty of room in the back for all of your groceries.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Take that tire out, you could move your house out. Just a really special experience. I've really admired this car and really got to know this car since I started at the museum.
Yeah.
And the more I learned about it and watching the movie and understanding the story and how these were produced and what the goal was, it's just, you know, pure Americana.
But it's very interesting. We're tootling along at 2,000 RPM.
Yeah. 40 miles an hour.
Doing 40 miles an hour, whatever. In fourth.
Yep.
And you put an inch of throttle down and it takes off.
Right.
That's what I mean about being so tractable. You probably only really need top and third for most easy driving. Yeah. A slowish turn in third, you can still pull away very happy.
Picks out a third like nothing.
Yeah.
The sound is, you know, intoxicating is a word that's thrown around a lot, but you just want to keep burning fuel.
You do.
You never want to pick your right foot up. Because the sound, it's not only loud, it's not just a grumbling V8. The sound evolves into different types of sound throughout the rev range.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to see redline today. There's no reason to redline a stored car like this.
I can't imagine any...
Well, there's no reason historically to preserve this car. There's no reason to do that on a day like today. But you don't need the power up there. There's no reason to, but when you get up there, it gives you a reason to continue doing that because the sound is so addicting.
Yeah. It's great when you do go to historic race meetings, both here at Laguna Seca or
Lime
Rock or in Europe, and I keep going back to Goodwood and the Revival and the Goodwood members meeting, where Mustangs are always being raced, and they will be in the same bracket as Alpha 2 liters and much smaller cars. These are always the bigger cars on the grid in Europe. Oh man. God, that overrun.
Christmas is coming up, you know.
It's a symphony. Often used. What was I talking about? I was talking about racing.
Yes.
Fabulous, fast, down the straights. But they would always be pipped around the corners by the smaller, more nimble European cars, Alphas, whatever. And British MGBs and all those. But all around, I think this would be more fun because you can absolutely take off down straight.
Never gets old.
It never gets old. You would never tire of it.
Well, Nick, we could sit here and really make an effort to make this video 3 hours long.
We haven't got enough fuel.
That's true. Maybe we should cut it now,
I
though.
think we should possibly cut it, but it breaks my heart. This has been a real highlight.
This is fun. This is really fun.
Treat.
This is... You got to tell your friends across the pond about this one. If they're not already aware.
They'll be watching, I'm sure.
They can probably hear us right now.
Just across the pond.
Yes. Well, this was fun.
This third gear, you can just live in that gear.
Right.